So it's pretty subtle, but it pulls in these cool colors. You can get some more realistic clouds. It sort of circles it a little bit, and that's 50% of it is, I'll only try this,
Be sure to download the 10 free resources for church graphic design by going to smartdesign.church/graphics resource. That's smartdesign.church/graphics-resource. Hey, what's up, everybody? I am here with Alex Watson from pixelpreacher.net, and today we are breaking down a sermon series design that he created for another church, a church just like yours. So he's taking us through the process of getting a sermon series title, finding different pictures and different images that'll work, and turning that into a full-blown composition. And I gotta say, I'm super excited about this tutorial, but if you have not seen it yet, you need to watch the 4 secrets to sermon series graphic design. This is where you need to start with sermon series graphic design. So if you haven't seen that video, it's an interview with Alex, and he's breaking down the 4 secrets that you need to know before you start creating graphic designs for your sermon series. So go ahead and click that link up in the top right-hand corner of your screen if you're on YouTube, and if you're not on YouTube, we'll have the link somewhere in the post of this video that you're watching. So without further ado, let's jump into Photoshop and check out how this sermon series graphic design was made. Let's start from scratch. Here we go.
All right, so yeah, for me, this was again from a different from a client, so I wasn't starting really from scratch. This is really their Christmas series, and it's focusing on angels, and they're calling it messengers. So I was given a small movie board. I'll pull that up for you really quickly. They sent me several different images of some angels, and they wanted to stay away from the precious moments Cupid angels and do more masculine angels. They loved some of this type of artwork, and one of the things they sent me was a link to a video that I've loved for a long time. That's been pretty inspiring. Is these Digital Kitchen is a design house, and they did kind of a series on the story of Icarus. So it kind of has this Lemony Snicket vibe to it, and this really cool vintage type design, the little cutouts and stuff. So that's the direction they wanted to go. So I spent some time researching a little bit and landed on this is really kind of the final design for now. So I wanted to show you all the little pieces that make this up. One thing that I focused on was I knew that Gustav Dorr, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, had tons and tons of images of angels and of different stories in Scripture. So I started looking down that, and all of that stuff is from like the 1800s or 1700s, way back in the day. So it's all public domain. And a great resource that has high-res images is this CatholicResources.org has like a whole catalog of his stuff, and they're really high-res. So you can get in here and zoom in pretty far to get some nice quality on some of these designs. So I went through a lot of those, tried to find ones that were of angels or of clouds, because I know I was going to lean into that. And I grabbed a lot of these. So let me see if I can show you some of those. So some of these little angels here, a bunch of different ones. Some of them aren't quite as high res, but started pulling them out. And then I had to go through the painstaking process of cutting these out by hand. And for me, I don't really know of any easier way than just getting your eraser, turning on some music, and getting to work. So I'll show a little bit of a process of that. So for me, I always open up these, I try to get the highest res I can, and then I open up that actual file in Photoshop instead of dropping this into like a smaller 1920 by 1080. I want to make sure I have the highest res possible. So I right click on it and I just open with Photoshop. And then I kind of duplicate this layer a couple times, get rid of that locked layer. I want to make sure I have enough copies to where I don't erase it too much. And then I turn that one off and I start erasing. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit, and you can see I can get pretty close, and the high res is just great on this photo. So I use a tablet, a little a Wacom tablet, and grab my eraser, right click on it and change my size. Also use the keyboard as like brackets to make it smaller or larger. And then I just start kind of cutting it out. I try to make it somewhat big. And it doesn't have to be incredibly perfect, but pretty much this process for a very long time. So again, this was a Christmas project, so I cranked up some Christmas tunes to get into the spirit, and just started cutting away. This is obviously not that great, but trying to get really really good quality there, not crazy squiggly lines. Wanted to try to keep a nice stroke around the outside, like that black stroke around the outside, of this graphic. And this is a bad example, but again, went through a long process and then would single out this as one layer. And I'll go back to my main design, and I will start putting some of these pieces into a new document to show you kind of how they all start layering on. So I'll start with an angel to show you how I got the color, how I can keep the quality of the image and be able to move it around. So inside of here, I have, this just helps me keep organized. I have the main color that is on top of it, so I could change this angel to whatever. And this is just a rectangle, a shape layer. So you can make this whatever color. You could do a gradient, you could do whatever. I can change this to any color I want. And then I have a levels adjustment on it, and that's just causing me to be able to pull some of the, more contrast to it. So the way to use that, up here, use these all the time. These are great. I use levels, hue and saturation, selective color, pretty much in every project. But made it a clipping mask of just this angel right here, and then I can go in and fine tune, pull in a lot more of the shadows on that image, or less shadows. So that would just help me fine tune each little angel. And then there's let me duplicate this. I'll throw it up here. Just a texture that probably isn't totally necessary, but it adds a little bit more of a texture to it. And this is just blending through. The angel has a hard light blending mode on it to get that to kind of blend into the texture. All right, so delete that. So I made that. Well, let's see. Delete. Go away. There we go.
Crows in the background.
So that was. Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I got crows outside apparently. Sorry about that. It's not my dogs hanging out here making noises. It's crows. So, so I did that process multiple times, and that eventually, and then I think there's maybe a light drop shadow on there. A lot of times I would make the drop shadow separate, and I'll show you how I did that. But let me go back over here. And then, so that was my angels. And then I did the same process for also this main angel, which is blue, and then the clouds as well. So let me find some actual clouds. I'll just throw this over there so you can see it separately. So again, this is just a cloud layer. And there's maybe 3 or 4 different variations on this cloud layer. I have a few different ones that I pulled from different images. And again, I can scale these up to be pretty big. I feel like a big mistake is people not quite grasping like smart layers. So, you would throw an image in, for instance. Let me just find an image, see if I can give an example here.
And where'd you find these cloud layers? Was that the same Catholic resource?
Right. So they're all a part of that image. So, for instance, let me see if I can find one. I think where to go? This was one of the ones that I used a lot. I would just cut these clouds out here and then do some more photoshopping to make single clouds out of these layers. So yeah, I think a lot of people will. Let me see if I can just throw an example in here. This is gonna be bad because it's white. Let me throw a dark layer. So you thought, well, okay, I'm just gonna throw a cloud in there, and then I can. If you were to rasterize it, which means you don't have this little icon right here. So if I were to rasterize this just kind of makes it some images when you pull them in, they become this, and then you scale them down. You say, okay, cool, that's fine right there. But then later on, if you want to scale it up, like you're kind of done for because you start losing your quality. So that's why it's really important to have rasterized layers. So now if I try to scale it up, it's even worse. So you kind of make those errors a lot if you're kind of starting out because you don't quite realize the difference. But in here, when you have a smart layer, just make sure you start with it as big as you can, and then you can right click on it and do convert to smart object, and now you have a scalable, usable layer. So I keep all that in here, and then use a clipping mask to create. So I'll delete this as well. So this is that texture and that color on top of it. And to get it just on top of that cloud, I would control click my smart layer, this little color, and it kind of selects just that layer right there. And then I would click on my folder that has everything in it, and I would click this little button down here to make a layer mask on it. And so it's just saying everything that's black is going to be hidden, and everything that's white will be shown. So that's how I made those clouds.
Cool.
Anyways, and then we did the same thing with. Once I kind of built a lot of these pieces, it didn't have excuse me, it didn't have a lot of depth to it. So I started pulling in real clouds, and I thought, man, that's going to look kind of silly, like these real clouds plus fake clouds. But to me, it kind of worked. It kind of blends these two worlds together. There's a lot of little resources online you can find of transparent clouds, or you can find clouds on black backgrounds and do some blending modes on them. But there's tons. I think one of the sites you can use that are great is like pexels.com and pixabay.com or Unsplash. A lot of those even have some of these on there. But then you can just drag these in, and you get these nice transparent, which I just showed you in this one here was this. I don't have any more, but that transparent cloud layer is great for adding some texture to it. So I started scattering those in here a little bit. So let's see, let me move some of these. So there's some really big ones that are up close. These are all really up close. And then I have a few scattered in here. I had to do some colorization or labeling because I was getting lost in all my layers. But inside of here, there's some back here in the back, which is again creating some more depth there. So once I landed the main, kind of had it all pieced together, it really lacked a lot of depth, and so I needed to add some shadows to it. And there wasn't really an easy way to do that by just throwing a drop shadow on it. I needed to spend some time and pretty much add a shadow layer in between every single piece. So let me jump down here and let's see. So this cloud, so I needed to create shadows for this cloud layer, which is right, so we can find it. So right there, you can see it in this little section. So the way I would do that is I would create a new layer. So I'll do Shift and Command and N, and I'll just turn that on for now. And then I believe this one was set to hard light. Let's see. Yeah, so hard light up here. I just went ahead and set my layer because I knew that's the blending mode I wanted to use. I took my brush tool with my pen. I think I just had like a pretty dark color, a dark gray. Made sure that layer was selected. My brush tool was on. Had a pretty soft brush. Oops, do that. Turn that hardness all the way down, and then I would just sort of paint in just a little bit. And even if it was too dark, I would turn my opacity down on my brush so I could go pretty gradual on it, and maybe even try to get some small little shadows in there, just ever so slightly. It's like Bob Ross, but so that's kind of the process there. And with those blending modes, they can start. It blends really well with the different textures versus just a basic. Just it doesn't really look very cool. So, and I live and die by blending modes. So, if you're fairly new to design, mess with those because they're great. So
would you say? Sorry to interrupt, but when you're trying to add depth to an image, or whether it's this one or really any other design, is shadows kind of your go-to, or is there other techniques to creating depth?
Shadows is one for sure. Another one I do a lot, which is let me see if I can think of. I guess I can try. Trying to think of a design that I've done recently that would have this technique. But usually, I would maybe even add like some highlights to give it almost like you're looking at a painting. So maybe this folder does it, and it's so subtle. Like there's not a whole lot to it, but there's something about adding some small little highlights, so you can see some of it changing here. I would go in and make a new layer. One of my little tricks that I just do is I add just a big color layer to it. So I'm going to be drastic with it to give you an idea, but I would get a brush tool, make it pretty big, nice, a lot of hardness, even bigger than that, like really big, and almost like sunlight is coming in from the side. So I'll do maybe a light brush up here, and then just I gotta dissolve on my brush. I would do like just a quick little brush like that, and then go through some blending modes. if it's going to let me. I know you want to. There we go. And start going through and see what happens to the design. A lot of times, maybe like a screen or lighting would give you something that's obviously way too bright. Maybe you could dial it back, and it kind of looks like there's some other light source that we didn't have before. That can add a lot of depth. Blur, maybe adding some of these. I didn't want to blur it too much, but like these realistic clouds up front that are here. Whenever I know my intention is I'm going to want to animate this at some point. So having these kind of, drifting at a different speed because they're closer to the camera is going to add, a ton of depth. So those are a few things. If I wanted to put some birds that are bigger, maybe they're out of focus or something like that, then I could. And again, it just creates a lot of depth. I feel like for me, I want to make it designs feel like whenever you look at it, what it actually like feels like to your hands. Like it has a tangible feeling to it. Does that make sense? Yeah. Let's see. Let's pull some of these layers back a little bit. I'll turn off like this main object, which is my big cloud. My text I can turn off now. I'll start with just the background. Turn these birds, close clouds, sun rays. Sky overlay. So then, this is really just where my background started. Turn off these clouds for now. And again, these are just textures I pulled from, Unsplash or something like that. I think I can do. Let's see. You can sort of see it's all blended in there, but like a light concrete texture. Oh geez, I really messed up now. Turn off everything. Oh, Jiminy Christmas. Hang on, let's pause it. I just really messed myself up. I hit Option, then I changed something, and now all my layers are off in like every fold. Oh, you gotta be kidding.
Yeah, I think because I have a PC at work, if I hit Option or Alt or whatever it is, and I click on a layer, that solos it.
Like it's good, then you can click it again and it brings them back. But if you make a change, everything is off.
Didn't know that.
So we'll have to kind of cut this in. Let me see if I open it back up, if it will. Okay, cool. I think I can jump in and start talking about if I scale everything back and turn off all these layers, then we'll kind of piece it together. Is that fine? Am I doing all right? Do I need to change
No, you're doing
anything?
Fine.
Okay. All right, so there might be some kind of hard cut here, but
that's all right.
All right. So let's scale back some of these layers. Let's turn them off, and I'll kind of show you all the little pieces. So I'm going to just drag my mouse down here and show you really what it's made up of. A lot of people have a hard time starting from scratch, and I get that. I just think you got to start dragging textures in to see what works. So if I were to go into this this empty document here, see if I can delete these. And I started with a few textures. I knew I wanted to be fairly white of some sort, maybe a grayish or something. So I pulled this texture, which I didn't end up using. These nice cracks here. I can throw that in there. Oops. Let's see. What in the world? My hard drive's waking up. Sorry, I'm going to give you a whole lot of editing to do.
That's all right.
Start that again. Yeah. I'm falling apart. What does it matter? Delete. What's the problem? Weird. Okay. So I found this image here with these cool cracks in it, and I thought that might be nice. So threw that in here. And again, I think those come in as smart objects, so I can keep those as is. I really like this texture here. Fairly subtle. Then I would add, just a white, fairly white, solid color. Throw this in here. Make a big square. Put that on the bottom, and then started messing with these cracks ended up making like a full-on texture. So I would duplicate that, flip it over, pull this up, and kind of blend these together. Maybe an eraser. I knew I wasn't going to be scaling it too much more, but so I ended up rasterizing it. Could get a nice soft brush and sort of erase these and get a nice crack texture in there. Could throw those into a folder or something.
And where did you find these nice textures? Do you just Google texture?
These, I think, are. I think I try to use things that are Creative Commons, and there's a good site. So Pexels is one. I think Pexels.com. All these things here you can use, and they kind of fall under Creative Commons license. And if you can give the author or the photographer credit, then great. But it's not like required. Another one was Pixabay or Unsplash. So I would just type in like concrete or something like that. Concrete. And you could find some really nice. They're all like really high res photos. So that's a great place to start. So again, started blending those together. Threw this one on top of it. I try not to ever use like one straight out of the gate, so it's not like, hey, I recognize that texture from whatever site. And again, blending modes on that. Trying to get something somewhat light. Probably dial those cracks back a bit. Eventually got somewhere around there. To this through some levels and saturation on there. And then towards the end of the project, I ended up just grabbing this sky, which is one of the images there. Let me throw it into. I don't want to turn off all my layers. Which was just a sky with a color burn on it, but it was this as it is. It was just bright, colorful sky. So when added on there and blended all together, it would give you this extra bit of, let's see. So it's pretty subtle, but it pulls in these cool colors. You can get some more realistic clouds. It sort of circles it a little bit. And I didn't know, and just I went through maybe 2 or 3 before I found one that did something to it. And that's 50% of it is I'm gonna try this.
And it's crazy how much that one layer does. Like it seems pretty flat until you add that layer, and then all of a sudden it looks like a complete package.
Right. And threw a hue and saturation on there as well. So I would drop a adjustment layer and then click on this little button for a clipping mask, so that just affects that. So if it was just normal, it gets all these colors in there, and that just to me didn't look right. So I've dialed that way back. That was my sky overlay. I had these sun rays, which was from one of the images, and that's right there. It kind of pulls your eye to the text, like it's this glorious cloud of angels, and then the close cloud layers, which were these cutouts here, and that was me just piecing these together. So it was just this layer by itself. Throw this up here so you can see it. So when I cut it out, it was this. And then it was already a pretty big image, so I could scale it up if I needed to. And started piecing them together and placed them where I wanted them. And then threw them all into a folder, so I had them all together. And let's see, then I was reluctant to put any bird on it, because I feel like that's a easy trick for a lot of designers these days. Like, let's just put some birds on it. But I get it. For me, it was justified because it added some perspective to this whole piece. It shows you. Yeah, it shows you. I know what the size of a bird is, so this must be pretty big. This feels much more grand, and you have these birds kind of flying by. So that was kind of the thought behind that. I'm trying to think what else I use. Let's see. I did a pretty simple font here. I use, since I do the templates for Pixel Preacher, I don't want people to have to go and buy fonts to use the project. So I try to always keep them, find completely free fonts, and Google Fonts is great. They have a lot of great fonts in there. So I think this was on there as well.
Right.
So let's see. It was called I'm Fell English, whatever that means. But I was a big fan of it. So that was my title. I didn't do anything too special to it. I wanted this one. Sometimes your text has to be the kind of the star of the show, and this one I wanted the angels to be the star of the show, this really just to support the main image. I added some extra little scripture in there. So let's see, maybe another main object. There are a few little lines of scripture to tell the story a bit. So there are lines from scripture. So glory to God in the highest, things that angels have said, since that's sort of their take on it. There's another one right there, and they're really far back. It's almost, you're not supposed to really be able to read it. It's just to add some flair. Yeah. Trying to think what else. My hero angel standing nice and tall there. And I threw some of these in the back that are these darker angels. Originally, I didn't have those, which was just this. And it just added, again, another layer of detail that I thought made it feel a little bit bigger. I don't know if it's too busy, but I don't know if it felt right, so I left it.
Yeah.
We'll see. They haven't actually got this approved yet. So
and it seems like all of this is really just about layering and adding more depth.
Exactly. Yep. This is all like layering and trial and error. If it doesn't work, then that's okay. But yeah, I would throw this in there, and almost every layer I try some sort of blending mode. So I would start. Let me do a different one. So I think this is the darker layer. This ended up being sort of an inverted look on these angels. So it looks kind of weird when you see their faces, right? Like that looks like some cheesy horror film. But when they're dialed back and you don't see their faces, just some wings, it looks kind of nice. So I went through several different, again, just blending modes on that. Let's see if I can cycle through some of those.
I know you said you almost had a blending mode on everything. Do you even try blending modes on what your subject is, like that big blue angel? Would you even experiment with that, or are you like, nah, there's not going to be a blending mode?
Yeah, there is. I couldn't. The one reason why I need to go, I'm not sure where it was, but I won't say this. There is one on that one, and that's mainly, I would do a blend. Let me show you. So, and that's the reason I had to build these folders like this, because I wanted to include that texture. And let me see if it changes much. So like here, this has a blending mode on this angel, right? So the angel is on a hard light blending mode. But if I do that without any flat background, it's going to blend through every single layer. So you can see the cloud in there. You can see this other angel's wing. So I had to build, all these angels and clouds as their own separate group.
Wow, I see.
So this background here, which is that concrete type background, which is in every one of these layers, is unblended. So it's set to normal. That way, my clipping mask, which is right here, is only going to cut out that shape of the background, but yet my angel is going to blend with it.
So does that make sense? There is a blending mode on the angel, but what you're seeing through it is not everything. It's just that textured background that's behind it.
Right. So the angel is only blending with that normal unblended texture.
Okay, so that's something to keep in mind too. Is blending modes come in handy almost all the time, but it might not be a universal blending mode that you see through the object itself, but maybe just with a texture or something like that.
Yeah. So if I just had these flat, so let me turn this off and turn this angel to normal. I don't get quite the color control on that. Especially this one. What's great about these images is they're already riddled with a lot of texture, in the actual design. But if you had some basic image and you tried to blend them, you wanted to do some sort of texture on it, then that's where the clipping masks come into play, because you can add in different textures and just clip out that shape. So, and then usually at the very end of a project, for the most part, I'll get to a point where I feel 80% great about it, and then I start throwing in random stuff to see if it works, and if it doesn't, then I quit. But mainly that's just for fun. So for instance, I was trying to throw in like maybe some kind of like sparkles or glimmer of some sort. So let me see if I can find like sparks. I don't know. Let's see what comes up. So for instance, like this. Let's do this image here. So it's got a nice black flat background. I'm just going to click on free download. You can get a massive size of it. We'll just do a small one for now. Downloads that. I'm just going to throw it right in here. And it has it's a sparkler, so I don't want any of that sparkler on there. So what I'm going to do is probably just go ahead and rasterize the image. And then I'm going to paint over. I'm going to use my stamp tool. And if you don't use the stamp tool, it's super helpful. I can say I want to take part of this image here, this black, and then paint over just that image. So it kind of copies it from one part to the next. So I'm going to try to get rid of all of these stick pieces. Okay, so that's not the best example, but you get the idea. So, I was thinking maybe I put it behind the angel and it does some kind of crazy little, effect to it. So then I would go through blending modes to figure out what sticks. And I maybe actually would start like, you can't really see that. Let's keep going. So you got some sparks right there. You could, let me throw it on top of the angel. So that's obviously terrible. And I would realize like, okay, well this type of image isn't really going to work. But I would do that. So let's take this for like this kind of works. Obviously, it's not what I would keep, but you get that it blends in with the real thing. So I would play with things like that, like maybe this, or maybe that, and then I get to a point where I say, okay, I'm done with it. I feel good about it, and then I usually add a extra layer of color correction to the whole thing. So this has a selective color on everything, and to me, it feels like it pulls the image all together. It takes all the blacks and all the whites and all the neutral colors and affects them all the same way. So if I turn it off, this is what you're left with. So it's okay, but then you throw on I'll go from scratch. So I'll do selective color, and then I usually go just mess with these whites, neutrals, and blacks. So I'll go to the blacks and then just start dialing these things around a little bit, messing around with them. You can see that it pulls all the blues. It adds a whole lot more blues into the blacks. I don't want too much green, so then I start getting more purpley colors, pulling that yellow. I don't want this ugly yellow color, so I'll pull that back. Can get some richer blacks there. I may go up to the neutrals and play with that some. Just mess around and see what works and what doesn't. And to me, man, that takes an image from 70% to 100%.
Yeah.
So, if I had it off, that's what it was, and then I put my final one on, and that's what it's left with. So that is such a huge add. So always play with different color adjustment layers, curves, levels. Selective color is my favorite. People use gradient maps a lot, which can work. So I think that kind of goes through the entire project.
Cool. So before we wrap up, I have two questions. One was going back to earlier when you talked about in this project you had a mood board. What would you do in a situation where, and maybe you've probably experienced this, where a pastor comes up to you and says, "Here's the title." You don't have a mood board or anything. It's just your imagination. That's your mood board. Like, where would you go to get inspiration?
I would go to, I would spend a solid day and a half. And this happened all the time when I worked at the church. Was all we would get was an outline. So it would be this is called, whatever, Life of David or something. And it would break down the weeks. I would kind of go through those and look at the scriptures they're going to reference. And then I'm assuming, since they didn't give me any direction, that they're trusting me as a designer. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm gonna go exploring and have a little fun and see what comes up. I usually go to like designspiration.net, and you have to be kind of careful. You might run into some risque photos on here, but I would type in, if I'm like, maybe I'm in a 3D mood, or I'm in a vintage mood or something, so I could type in vintage and just start looking through images and see what pops up. A good example would be, we did a throwing shade project. So I'll pull it up really quick so you can see it. And this was for a church, but they didn't give me any design direction whatsoever. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to just go for it. So this was the final design. They didn't give me any kind of direction whatsoever. And it's for students, so it was a little risky going with this carnival looking boxing match, but I think it worked. The bumper ended up being super quirky and fun. So, but I used Design Inspiration. Let me see if it has my account on here. Collections maybe. So yeah, this was one of my little mood boards.
Okay.
Started going through old posters and weird black and white photos, and then went down a boxing match vibe. I loved this color right here, how these kind of blended together. So that was a big inspiration on that one. Same thing
So
here. I like this little
do you
wheel.
go through like every? Do you go through any photo, or are you like searching, throwing shade, and see what comes up? Or
Oh no, I would just say I would, start looking through this and I would come across boxing or um, uh, you know, weird photos. So I could just type in like weird photos and see what comes up, and it would probably give me some strange, random stuff on here. Like this guy eating a biscuit, and that's super weird. But yeah, random stuff like that, like the lady on the phone. Like I thought, like let's go like super quirky with it and see. There's another site called uh, uh, Black and White, Black and WTF maybe or something like that. WTF. Let's see if this comes up. And it's a Tumblr that has these crazy old vintage photos that you're like, what is this about? What is going on here? And so I would just kind of spend some time on there and get like, inspired or whatever. Another great resource that I used for this one was the Library of Congress has loc.gov has tons of public domain photos. So I could, look for maybe let's type in like vintage boxing and see what comes up. I have to go through some of these filters, but you can find all art, newspaper articles and different photos. See if I can find photo prints and drawings. Well, maybe it was a bad example, but somehow I eventually found a link to all these like great boxing matches, and a lot of them are public domain and are pretty high res. So I cut those out, and that was kind of how I ended up with the throwing shades. So if you don't get to, any kind of direction, then trust that if the pastors put it in your hands. So have fun with it. I say throw out 2 to 3 designs that you're excited about and want to attempt, and just spend some time looking and researching. So that's how I ended up with that.
awesome. So my second and last question is, without thinking about it, what is your favorite Christmas movie?
Christmas Vacation,
Oh,
no doubt. I'm a huge Chevy Chase fan.
I had
So
a feeling it would be a comedy. I mean,
oh
it
yeah,
has to be.
yeah. Christmas Vacation is up there. If outside of that, I mean, you can't really top that.
I don't know. I'm a big Elf
That's
fan, but
Yeah, I mean, well, like Elf was like the cutoff. Like to be able to make a modern day Christmas movie become a classic is a feat that I can't quite comprehend. So they nailed it. I think about that with Christmas songs. Like you can't. No one's writing a Christmas classic these days. Right? Mariah Carey was like the
yeah,
last.
that's what I was gonna say. That was pretty close,
Yeah,
but
yeah. So I love Christmas. I've already been jamming to Christmas music. We have a shameless self promotion. We have a Christmas playlist on Spotify that our sermon series design group has. So
awesome.
you should check it out. It's got some when you're getting to your Christmas vibe, and subscribe to our follow our little playlist there.
Well, that's a good
So yeah,
a good segue into asking you where people can find more about you.
yeah. So our where I am the most, where you can find me pretty easily, is on our Facebook page. And while I'm streaming our site here, this is our Facebook page, Sermon Series Design. So groups, I'm sure I'll put a link up there, but group/Sermon Series Design. We post things for inspiration. The other day we did logos from different people of the group from their church, and we did some animations for them to kind of teach them some After Effects stuff. People post, different designs they're working on. We get feedback and free resources. So that's a great place to find me. You can reach us on our website on pixelpreacher.net. There's a little chat feature that'll pop up down here. You can talk to us. We're there most of normal business hours. So that's the easiest way to find me. Email us through there, and I'm happy to answer any questions or help you guys out. So I appreciate you guys checking it out.
So, Alex, thank you so much for coming on the show. And if you guys are new here, go ahead and subscribe to this YouTube channel. We have a new video out every single week on video creation for your church, because it's all about reaching people for the kingdom of God through the power of video. So if you're new here, go ahead and subscribe, and we will see you in the next video.